Welcome, everybody, to this session of the AgrAbility Virtual National Training Workshop. I had just a little bit of technical problem with the audio on my computer, so I'm trying on an alternate method. Sorry for the delay there. If you have any problems with audio or hearing, please let us know in the chat window on the right. So this morning we're going to be talking with Ed Bell about secondary injury and also showing you some resources that are available in regard to secondary injury and how you might be able to evaluate the potential for secondary injury in people that you work with or for your own enterprises. Before we start with the discussion here, a few instructions for those that might not be aware of these issues. If you're having any problems with the audio, please go up to the audio menu at the top of your screen on the left and check that. You can make adjustments there. We ask that you not activate your camera to cut down on bandwidth issues. And so if you see a camera icon next to your name at the right on the participant list, we ask that you click on that to deactivate that. Okay, it looks like we have our captions available now. Those are on the right column of your screen. If you don't see those, you can go to the top and click on the caption, closed caption icon to make those available. You can also expand or contract the entire right column by clicking and dragging on the border between that and the presentation. Any of those other windows like chat or a participant list can be closed if you prefer them closed. Today is going to be more of a discussion format than a traditional presentation. So we would invite you to be as interactive as possible. If you have questions during the presentation, we'll be monitoring those. So you can feel free to type questions into the chat window. You do need to hit the send button, and you need to make sure that you select, in terms of send to, you need to select everybody. Should be your everyone. That should be your only option, but that does have to be selected in order for you to send. And then you need to click the send button. If you have questions you would like to ask verbally, you may click on the raise hand icon that should be next to your name also, and we will unmute you so that you can ask your question verbally. Again, we want to make this more of a discussion than a formal presentation, so feel free to do that. We will be doing our poll questions at the end, and so we'll also have an opportunity for you to share comments about the presentation or suggestions. We are recording the session, and we will archive it along with the other archived recordings on our website. If you have any technical issues, we ask that you please use the chat window in order to let us know about that. Potential issues: if the audio seems to be working, but you are not seeing slides advance, you may want to hit your enter return or click on your mouse to make sure your computer's awake. We will not be using extensive PowerPoint this time, so that may not be as much of an issue. If we happen to get disconnected, please hang on, and if you happen to get bumped out for some reason, you may want to just log in again. I think probably most of you are familiar with AgrAbility. It looks like we've got a lot of AgrAbility people out there today. If you're not, we do specialize in working with people in agriculture that have some kind of a physical disability or impairment. We have a number of projects around the country, and there's one national AgrAbility project here at Purdue University. As always, please feel free to visit the website at agrability.org and check out more information about the program. This time I'm going to let Ed give a little bit of an introduction about himself, and then we'll go to some questions about secondary injury. Some of you know Ed well, some of you don't know him at all. So we thought this might be a good opportunity for him to kind of give you a background on where he's been, and then we'll talk about some of the more specific issues that he's been experiencing in the last year or so. So I will pass the ball over to Ed and turn off my camera and microphone for now, and return a little bit later.
Well, ready to roll here? Thank you, Paul. 1 minute. Are we going? Okay.
Yes, you are.
Very good. Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate you having me here. For those of you that I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet, my name is Ed Bell. I'm a farmer from East Central Indiana. I live with my wife, Debbie. My daughter, Nellie, is now grown and married and lives with my son-in-law at Penn State. So he's attending classes there. But I am a farmer. I've lived on a farm almost all my life, and raised strawberries, asparagus, and Doberman puppies. So how's that for a mix? Have raised a lot of other things too. I'll give you a little history, a little background in my time allotment here. I do have a disability now, but I haven't always had disability. I have a spinal cord injury. I'll talk about that in just a second. This is the last picture on the last page of my high school yearbook. I overhauled that tractor in shop class. I was pretty well born and raised on a farm almost. I lived on the same place since I was 7 years old, and have at different times I've raised vegetables and livestock, pigs, cattle, sheep, so on. Typical Indiana small diversified farm. Had the FFA experience. I was in high school. I was in the shop class and just kind of the classical American Midwest agricultural experience. My hobby was showing horses, and don't judge me for the outfit that I'm wearing there in the picture. I don't know. Paul slipped that one in. And when I was 21 years old, 1982, my wife and I survived a crime attack. She was not hurt, but I was shot and paralyzed at T1, complete spinal cord injury, which is about my armpits or my collarbones down. In the early days, I had a loss of the use of my hands. I was like complete quadriplegic for a while, but slowly was able to regain the use of my hands. But I'm completely paralyzed from about the armpits or collarbones down now. We're making some adjustments here, I think. Okay, there we are. Hi. I'm kind of a technophobe. Paul's helping me out here. Came home from the hospital on December. I was shot September 5th of 1982. Came home to the hospital, or from the hospital, on December 12th of 1982, in a stainless steel heavy wheelchair on a pig farm with a gravel driveway. And slowly, my family and I tried to figure out what I was going to do from there on. My wife and I went ahead and we were married in 83 and started a new life. We actually purchased the farm later on in 87, swapped some equipment around, and I slowly started going back to work, not knowing that I would be able to eventually work to the level that I do now, where I run the farm on my own. It started off just as kind of a therapy to get me out of the house, and then when I found out once I was up on the tractor, I was able to work and be as productive as anybody else. So I'm still out there and still doing that and still farming today. I've had a lot of help over the years. We've kind of changed from collies to Dobermans now, but a lot of things have changed on the farm. We now retail everything that we grow and sell it there on the farm. We'll have as many as 1,000 people on our farm. We'll have 7 acres of strawberries and an acre of asparagus. But I have had a lot of folks helped me along the way, including AgrAbility and different neighbors and friends and family and so on. And it's a continuing learning experience. So I don't claim to be an expert in all things today. We have about half of our operation is picked by employees, and a little more than the other half is picked by customers. We sell everything retail there on the farm. We'll have on average about 1,000 people a day, and we have a strawberry festival on the first Saturday in June. And the first time we did that, we were surprised with 3,000 people that day. So pretty good numbers for a little farm with 7 acres of strawberries. May not sound like a lot of acreage, but if you've ever grown strawberries, 7 acres is a lot of strawberries. We enjoy making people happy, providing them a service that they enjoy, and kind of my wife's and I's outlook is we don't just cultivate the soil, we cultivate people. Without the people, the crop has no value. I like this picture. This is a wedding party. The bridesmaids brought the bride out to pick berries for the wedding reception. So we get to see lots of folks and hear lots of good stories, and we enjoy what we do. We were honored in 2006 to be chosen as the Indiana Farm Family of the Year. I'm not really here to toot my horn. I'm just kind of giving a little background information. I use a wheelchair full time. I do have a wheelchair that allows me to stand up. It does that mechanically. It's good for my health and my independence and so on. I use lots of technology and to be able to do what I do. In addition with employees and neighbors and so on, family members. So at that, I think I'll share this with Paul, and he's going to have some questions, and we'll go from there. And by all means, if you have questions, you're not interrupting, just jump in there and ask. Oh, I guess I do have another slide. Yeah, this is my daughter, Nellie. I would be remiss if I wasn't a proud dad bragging. We're kind of FFA nerds in our family. I was an FFA, as I mentioned earlier, but my daughter we're real proud that she was a state FFA officer in Indiana and did real well in her competitions and so on. She now she's married. My son-in-law, as I said earlier, is attending Penn State, working on a doctorate in dairy cow nutrition. So not every father-in-law will be happy about that, but I'm real pleased, real proud of him. And Nellie works for Farm Journal Media. She works in sales there. So my wife, Debbie, is a part-time RN at an Indianapolis hospital and worked in the emergency room for a lot longer than she'd want me to admit. So. All right, Paul, I think that's it.
Okay. Are you able to hear me through your
Yes, sir.
thing? Okay. Again, if there's any audio issues, please let me know in the chat. We'll go with this and see. Hopefully it'll work well. Again, we invite you to ask questions or give comments either verbally or through the chat window at any time during the discussion this morning. And I'm going to just start out with, I guess, the most recent past in terms of secondary injury issues. And I know you've had quite a tumultuous year in terms of your health. And can you just give us kind of an overview of, kind of the 5-mile view, and then kind of start in with how things started with the issues you were having and go from there?
Sure. I'm actually in pretty good shape right now for the shape I'm in. I had a major episode of health issue in starting. Let's see, it was in 2014, August 2014, and I feel kind of odd in maybe a national webinar talking about my bottom, but it's exactly where it originated. I've been really blessed, but it hasn't come by accident. It's come by a lot of diligence. It's very common to have skin problems and pressure problems for somebody with a spinal cord injury, and but I haven't had any issues at all since '82. I've gone for 30 some years, never had a pressure sore or anything. So a lot of that is just being careful and being aware, and prevention is worth a pound to cure. Pardon the cliche, but it's true. But on the August of 2014, I acquired a minor little scrape. Like you would scrape the skin off your knuckles, not a big deal. Maybe you put a Band-Aid on it, a little peroxide, that sort of thing. But happened to be on my bum, my backside, my bottom, probably transferring in and out of bed or shower or something. I have no sensation there, so I don't feel. But we thought we were on top of it. I've had those things happen before. It's minor, but you never take anything for granted. And had a bandage and cleaning the wound and so on. It was just maybe the size of a large pencil eraser. It was just very superficial. Didn't think much about it. It wasn't a pressure issue, but I acquired cellulitis from that little wound. And cellulitis is a skin infection. It gets into the layers of the skin, and if I was able-bodied or up walking around or had sensation, or it happened to you, you would know. You would start having discomfort and like, hey, something's wrong here. Well, with the cellulitis, when I don't have sensation with paralysis, it's serious by the time I notice it. And the first symptoms that I get are rapid swelling. And then followed by infection and fever and so on. So that ended up taking me to the hospital, which I'm never a happy camper when that happens. But my thigh swelled up, and I was quite swollen with the infection from about my knee up to my buttocks on my left side. And I'd had episodes of cellulitis like in my feet or toes before, which is pretty common for paralysis. It never was a big deal. You take some antibiotics, keep my foot propped up for a few days, and follow through on the antibiotics. It goes away, and you're up and going and fixed. So I didn't think much about it this time. However, I ended up getting quite sick and developed an abscess right where I sit from this cellulitis, where this little scrape was, and that deteriorated the muscle. Where it's real important for me, because I spent a lot of time on my bottom, being a wheelchair user, and consequently, it was as if I had a major pressure sore by the way that skin broke down, and I wasn't real happy about that. Had to have a couple of surgeries and to clean out the abscess, and didn't go real well. I just didn't bounce back the way they thought I would, and ended up with a osteomyelitis, a bone infection in my pelvis. And the real awakening moment for me was when I asked the doctor what was when he was telling me that I had osteomyelitis, a bone infection. I said, well, what's the preferred treatment here? What's the game plan? He goes, well, he says, the preferred treatment for osteomyelitis is amputation, but with your pelvis, we really can't do that. So and that was a big eye-opener for me. I thought, wow, this is really serious. And I was really sick in those days. And they put me on a couple of really big gun antibiotics, very high, like maximum dosage for 10 weeks. And I was very, very sick for all that time period. I had to be hospitalized. And, I don't want to sound like a really bad country western song by bemoaning, all my health issues, but I was in the hospital last 2014, 2015, a total of 4 months. I was hospitalized, and then I was down. Even when I came home, I was down another 4 months. So I was in bed for the equivalent of 8 months, other than just getting up for treatment. And 1 month after time period, I wasn't allowed to even set up, like to eat or drink. I had to lay completely flat. I could lay on my back or on my left side or right side, but I couldn't even set up to eat or drink. Had to, for an entire month, had to lay completely flat, immobilized. And for a guy who worked on a farm and worked really hard. And then in the wintertime, I had an off-farm job where I worked for the Standing Wheelchair Company, and I was on the road like 25,000 miles a year. My shadow didn't have a long time to sit in one place, but so that was a big mental challenge for me, and it was I had a lot of time to lay there and think and reevaluate. And I remember getting frustrated at one time, thinking not real sure what my future held, thinking I might not be able to sit and do the things I used to do, that my life might have once again changed dramatically like it did when I was paralyzed. And I remember getting frustrated one day and throwing away my work hat, thinking that might not be something that I would need again in the future. Long story short, with that episode, I ended up having a flap surgery. I completed the antibiotic course, and we were able to eliminate the osteomyelitis. That was a concern because sometimes you're never able to fully get rid of that. But they were able to eradicate it in me. And then I had a flap surgery, an extensive one, like you would if you had a major pressure sore. And that really put me back in the game. Once I recuperated from that, I just really had started to enjoy a season of restoration. But my life did change in the fact that I don't take that for granted anymore. The fact that I'm really vulnerable to injury. I always have been, but I just kind of became unaware that the little things can knock you out. I was aware that the big things, you need to sit on a cushion and be careful with your bottom, and not hop out of your chair and sit on the gravel driveway when you're working on a vehicle or something, or piece of farm equipment. You need to work really hard to prevent wounds and pressure issues. But I didn't really realize how the little things can explode rapidly and really change your life. So I've had a real eye-opening experience there, and I want to share that with other folks too.
Well, thanks for that overview, Ed. While you were talking, I had a few thoughts. How did you deal with your farm operation during the time that you were out of the game? What steps did you take there?
Well, my operation with strawberries and asparagus is very seasonal, and my harvest time is over around Father's Day, and this started in August. I still had some field work and things that needed to be done, but that was just neglected. We just had to let it go. I didn't get the fertilizer onto the strawberries that I normally do in the summertime, and there was some cultivations and things. But the strawberries are pretty resilient, and we weren't real sure. In fact, when it all started, I wasn't sure I would ever have another strawberry harvest. Now it's easy for me to look back and go, oh, well, I had a happy ending. But when I was going through the ordeal, I wasn't too as upset about not getting the tasks done that needed to be done late summer and fall for the berry crop. I was more concerned about, would there ever be another berry crop? Would I ever even, experience a tractor other than out a window again? And then there was I had some neighbors and some friends that helped me out in the spring to do some essential things that needed to be done, and I came back from the hospital in May 1st of this year, 2015, and I was extremely out of shape. Though that was a big problem, after actually essentially laying down for 8 months. I was allowed to start getting up like an hour a day, then 2 hours a day, and I remember I would lay there all day thinking, okay, I only have an hour today to get up. What will I do? If you only have 1 hour a day, what would your hour consist of? And one of those days was, I can't mow, but I can get the lawnmower ready so somebody else can mow. And I went out to change the oil and spark plug on the lawnmower, and I didn't have enough strength in my hands to pull the spark plug wire off. and I was just like, wow, I am so out of shape. There was a lot of pain and so on, trying to get back into shape, and I didn't really do physical therapy so much as I did just pacing myself and working and so on. But yeah, it's been a ride.
So was your treatment primarily just kind of primary care stuff, or was there a rehabilitation component to what you were doing either before you got out of the hospital or after that?
Sure. In the beginning, it was treating the abscess and debridement and so on, and working on that wound. There was some hope that maybe it would close and heal on its own. They couldn't really do anything until they cleared up the osteomyelitis. So that was, which is potentially fatal. And I was really ill. So we had to attack. We say eat the elephant one little bite at a time, and we had to attack the infection first. And once we got past that, then we really started addressing the wound. And I went into a wound care treatment facility. Did the hyperbaric chamber where you go into the this bubble boy, hyperbaric chamber. It looks like a big acrylic tube, like a clothes dryer that you actually slide into, and they call it diving because they immerse you in 100% atmosphere under pressure, as if you were like diving in the ocean, and that intense oxygenated environment facilitates the healing of a wound. And I did those treatments every day for 40 days in a row. And I was able to get quite a bit of healing and until I was able to be a candidate for the flap surgery, where they actually reconstructed. You're learning way more about my bottom than you really want to know.
So you're kind of a bionic. Well, anyway, at least part of you is better than it was before.
I'm the butt of a joke now, I know.
Okay. I looked up that chamber thing, and I thought I got the right thing, but it kept saying it was a treatment for people that were experiencing problems when they were diving, like came up too fast and they put them in this chamber, and I thought that can't be the right thing, but it was the right thing.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's they use it to treating the bends or for the hyperbaric chamber. Yep. In fact, if you're closer to the coast, they'll have those in hospital facilities where you can have multiple people in them at one time. So if they have a crew of divers that are affected, they can go in there. So they had to be very careful after I was pressurized to bring me back to normal atmospheric pressure, because I could have experienced the bends. So
we had
How long did you have to do those treatments each time you went in? How long was the
2 hours?
2 hours?
Yeah, 2 hours, and you couldn't take anything in. You had to strip down completely and put on special pajamas because 100% oxygen environment, you were at great risk of fire, pressurized oxygen. So no static cling. I had to be grounded. You couldn't take anything in there with you. I couldn't even wear my glasses. No wedding band or anything. So.
Did it feel different in terms of the sensation on your body?
You had to pop your ears, like you would if you're going up and down in a plane. But otherwise, you didn't really notice anything.
Ed?
Yes.
We have a comment question from Shell Brown.
Sure.
Good morning, Ed. It's good to see you. You use the standing wheelchair. What are your thoughts about something more able to get around, such as a newer wheelchair with tracks? Or does your standing wheelchair fit the requirements of the farm?
It depends on what I'm wanting to do. The standing chair does a great job, and it actually gets around on rough ground pretty good. I am a little bit interested in Life Essentials. I think it's the Journeyman, the heavy-duty trike that Hubert von Holten is making for rougher ground. But the standing chair really handles mostly what I need to get around for mobility. As far as the track chair, I have tried the track chair. It's, in my opinion, it's just my opinion. It's really more of an ATV than a wheelchair. The fact that you can't get it on a lift or in and out of a doorway limits it greatly, and the battery life is really limited. But to be able to get out in rough area to go fishing or work or something, out to the deer stand, it's a really good rugged option. Proper tool for the proper job.
Okay, we have another comment/question from Carolyn McGraw. I'm getting a little bit of echo, so if you can ask Paul to go ahead and mute his mic while you speak. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. So Carolyn says, thank you for speaking today, Ed. When were you first fitted for your chair? When you were first fitted for the chair, what were the most prominent unexpected challenges or obstacles that you faced on the farm? How have you seen technology and support for agricultural disabilities evolve during your life?
Oh, wow. That's another presentation for another day. That could go on for a while. I'm really old. I think spinal cord injuries should be measured like dog years, where you get like 4 to 7 years credit for every year you survive. The first wheelchair I ever sat in, I know this sounds like an old man exaggeration story, but the very first wheelchair they ever put me in was in Wishart Hospital after I was hurt, and it was one of these old wooden ones that had the wooden back and seat and the wicker weave. Yeah, and you had the wheels in the front and the little dolly wheels in the back. That was the very first experience I had sitting in a wheelchair. It was just to go down to therapy and so on. It wasn't my chair. But when I was discharged, they put me in a stainless steel heavy, in those days it was a basketball chair, because they thought, oh, well, you're a farmer, you're going to be active, you need a basketball chair and a manual chair. Which I pushed a manual chair for 11 years because I thought that was the best way to be active and stay healthy, which it was probably 10 years and 6 months too much in a manual chair. My arms are everything to me, and I have to use them like legs too, but they're not designed to be used like legs. So it took me a long time to adapt the idea of proper tool for the proper job, and a power chair is just a device to help me be more independent and to get things done. And I'm able to be far more independent and stay healthy and make a living and support a family with the technology I'm using today.
Since we're talking about chairs a little bit, and you've also talked about pressure sores, but you've never actually had a pressure sore per se, is that correct? Sure.
I sat for 20 years, and until I found a standing wheelchair. I'm not really, pumping any company right now, just technology in general. But one of the reasons I started using a standing chair was I never had a pressure sore, but I never wanted a pressure sore. An extra perk was the idea that I'd be more independent, being able to stand up and then carry on a conversation eye to eye and so on. But all that was good, but I could see where being able to stand was a really good thing to alleviate pressure and to get off. And I've used a standing chair now for about 13, 14 years and done real well with it. And in fact, without that, who's to say, where I would be today, especially with going through what I did. Yeah, I was able to use that in my healing process, where the doctors would tell me, when I had the wound episode, that I wasn't allowed to be on the wound, but yet they would let me get into my standing chair and stand. So that was it was a great way to be able to get out of bed for a short time.
Obviously, there's are secondary injuries that are not necessarily related to paralysis, but I know you've had some experience with some other injuries, and we'll try to touch on some of those other areas that maybe don't relate specifically to paralysis if we have time. But you've mentioned some other issues that you've faced throughout the years in terms of breaking bones and that type of thing. And I know you just talked about the stress on your shoulders. Can you fill us in a little bit about some of those other more minor, though not minor, but more minor
Sure.
that you face?
It's all perspective. Well, really the only major episode I had prior to this wound last year was I broke my tib-fib on my just above my ankle on my leg. The only bone I ever broke, and it was just a kind of a silly thing. My type of paralysis, I'm pretty placid. Most times folks are kind of rigid with spasticity, but I'm kind of placid and loose. And I didn't have foot straps on my foot pedals, and I was bouncing across the ground and driving, pretty fast because I was working and didn't notice it because I didn't feel, and my foot had come off the foot pedals and it went underneath the wheels of my chair, and I had ran over myself. Well, it sounds funny now, but when you're in my situation, I remember that the first way that I knew that it happened was my chair came to a stop, and I looked down and trying to figure out why my chair, what it was hung up on, and it was hung up on my foot. And my thought was, wow, I bet that hurts. But I didn't know that it was broken. I'd had that happen before, and, it probably swelled or sprained, and you just kind of take it easy. But this time it didn't get better and had to be casted and so on. But that was the only bone that I'd ever broken before. But that seems kind of minor after what I went through last year. I guess broken bones are pretty common for guys like me because of those situations. But the fact that I've been hyper vigilant to be careful, and my wife is an emergency room nurse that likes to keep an eye on me. She's always, be careful, don't do this and this, and hey, let me. She helps me kind of maintain. I learned early on what you can't control, you have to manage, and so I for the shape that I'm in pretty good shape because I've really worked hard to try to manage my situations. But I have had episodes of problems, but those are the two big ones that have kind of knocked me out of the game for a little while. Other things were minor in comparison.
We have another.
You'd broken a couple toes or something.
Yeah, that happens. But if I was up walking around, I'd have probably broken some toes anyway. But farming's dangerous in general. But banging into things, the wheelchair doesn't care when you bang into things. Your toe's gonna know it. But I've done a lot of things to try to prevent those type of things. It sounds like I'm pretty careless, but like when I first got hurt, I had a welder, and I called up my friend Wally and I asked him to come and get it because I knew that if I kept that welder, I would continue to weld. I used it for repairs, and then kind of as a hobby, I'd make things. And I knew that I would burn myself and not know it without sensation. So I have an ongoing deal with my friend Wally. I gave him my welder back in the spring of '83, and I said, look, I want you to keep this, and if I need any welding done, I'll come to you. And if I get to where I'm able-bodied and up walking around, you can give it back to me. And he goes, okay, we got a deal. So he still has it.
We had another question from Carolyn McGraw. She says, thanks for answering my first question. What was the process like upgrading to the standing chair, and what kind of financial support was available to make this option affordable to farmers?
Sure. For me, it's different for everybody, but for me, I'd sat for 20 years, and I thought I'd get lightheaded or dizzy, but I didn't. There's something about standing and supporting your body weight that changes that compared to like a tilt table or something. I could never do the tilt table, but that's not a natural way to be vertical. But what I did experience was fatigue. I got fatigued pretty quickly, and the way I can relate that to you is if somebody that's able-bodied up walking around, you get that that feeling of, wow, I need a chair. I need to sit down. I've been on my feet all day and I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I need to sit down. I felt that very quickly, like within a matter of minutes. And I just set myself up on a regimen of standing for short durations very frequently until I was able to expand that. And now I can stand as long as I want, stand as long as people that are able-bodied. That took about 3.5 months of me working at it to get what I would consider normal standing duration. As far as funding, my wife, we have our insurance through her employer. She's a nurse, and we were very happy that they purchased the chair. My insurance covered it. I'm now on my second standing wheelchair through insurance that way, and I'll probably get another one in about another 3 years. I've worked with a lot of clients that acquire standing chairs, and several of them are farmers. And a lot of it, for those that aren't covered by insurance, vocational rehabilitation is a good source if they can work into identifying that not being able to stand is a barrier to employment. And that's fairly easy to do. If you're seated all the time, you can pretty well justify that not being able to stand is a barrier to employment, and an accommodation for that is a standing chair. It's a good working tool.
One other issue that you mentioned that some people might not be aware of is the temperature, body temperature regulation. Can you describe your situation and how you deal with that?
Sure. I haven't really had any major health issues there because I've tried to be prepared and proactive. But when I'm considered on my medical chart a quadriplegic, but I don't claim that title because I still can use my hands and arms. But I'm really what you would call a very high-level paraplegic or a very low-level quadriplegic. I do have some paralysis in my ring finger and little finger, and I'm not able to feel the bottom sides of my arms. So that's kind of the classic T1 injury. And one of the things that will distinguish a diagnosis of a quadriplegic versus a paraplegic is quadriplegia. I'm painting with a broad brush here, but for most folks, and particularly myself, you lose the ability to maintain your body temperature, both hot and cold. The cold is just brutal on me. Once I get cold, takes forever to get warm. I can't just, hop out of my chair and walk around a little bit and warm up, but my body just does not regulate my body temperature. It's kind of hard to describe. And the cold is not as dangerous. I mean, the risk is hypothermia and frostbite, but I can stave that off a little easier, even though it's miserable. One of the ways I'm warned about that is my right hand. I have a little more paralysis in my right hand than I do my left hand. And when I get cold, when my hands get cold, my right hand will stop working. I'm just that close to being a quadriplegic that when it doesn't take a lot of temperature change, but it'll just stop. And where I usually notice it is I start taking a little chill and I'll reach down to zip up my sweatshirt and the pinch grip in my hand doesn't work anymore. And I'm like, oh, well, I need to pay attention to that. So, and because the cold's so miserable for me, I usually am not at a risk of frostbite or hypothermia because I don't want to stay out in it that long. The flip side is heat. The heat is much more comfortable for me, but it's far more dangerous. I can easily regulate the heat by staying cool with staying wet. That's hard to do in certain occupations. I can't just wear wet clothes. But on the farm, I can put a wet towel around my neck. I'll pack a jug with ice water, and I'm always prepared for the heat. So probably the most dangerous thing I do on a really, really hot day is get in a vehicle and go to town. And I never take that for granted. I always, at a minimum, will have a water bottle with me or something where that if I break down and get stranded and I'm stuck in the heat, especially a hot car, I can get get my core temp down until I could get out of that situation. So,
with respect to the cold, Shell Brown asks,
can you not? One of the things we talked about, and
can you not use a
approaching our
okay. top
of the hour, which is unfortunate because I think you're doing a great job of filling us in on some of these issues. We talked about the fact that there are other, areas, other disabilities where secondary injuries can be an issue. And I know you mentioned that you've heard kind of some horror stories over the years from either associating with AgrAbility or from being at farm shows and hearing people talk about some of the things they've done that may not have been the safest, or some of the equipment they might have fabricated that may have sounded good but not incorporated some of the safest technology. So I was wondering if maybe you could share a little bit about that. And while you're doing that, I'll pull up another PowerPoint that talks about a resource that's available related to secondary injuries and maybe show a few examples. So if you want to talk, I'll try to do that at the same time.
Well, I have mentioned some of the problems I've had, but considering that I've been paralyzed since I was 21 and I'm 54 now, and I'm still independent and making a living and operating a farm, I've done fairly well for the situation I'm in. AgrAbility gets a lot of credit for that, not just AgrAbility services, but I've had the opportunity to, like you said, work a lot of farm shows, meet a lot of farmers, both able-bodied and those that have disability. And I've heard a lot of stories, a lot of horror stories, near misses, and stories of how they acquired a disability and so on. And in the back of my head is always, like running this note to self, never do X, Y, Z, because I can learn from somebody else's mistakes. I don't need to repeat that mistake. So that's part of the reason why I have avoided maybe some issues that, you only put your hand on a hot burner once, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll never do that again. So, well, I figure I can learn from somebody else's negative experience, and so I've missed some things, and like fires on my ag equipment or even vehicles that I'm in. I'm thinking about an egress there in an emergency situation if there was a breakdown or a fire. I don't want to be stranded in a situation like that. I always carry my cell phone with me, and not just carry my cell phone. I always have my cell phone in reach. My cell phone doesn't do me any good if I fall in a transfer and I can't reach my cell phone when I need it. But consequently, I don't want to carry I wear it in a case on a cord around my neck and shoulders, but I don't wear it in a way that if I fell in a transfer that it could snag me and choke me, strangle me. So I wear the cord. It's a lightweight cord that would probably break intentionally, but I wear it not around my neck, but around my neck and my shoulders under my arms. So if I did snag, I'm not gonna choke out or strangulate. So I'm constantly thinking about, what I can. My daughter teases me thinking that I'm, a bit paranoid sometimes, but it goes back to that old adage of what you can't control, you have to manage. So constantly thinking about, how I can prevent things, because believe me, it's a lot easier to prevent something than it is to treat it.
I think maybe, Cliff, was there another question?
Yes, there was, and it was just relating to the question about when you were talking about getting cold and your hands getting cold. Shell Brown had said, can you not use a heater on your tractor? I thought that was available.
Yeah, I have open station tractors. The type of work that I do, open station helps me do the type of work that I do because I'm interacting with employees, and I'm not a grain farmer where I'm out working 14 hours for 4, 5, 6 weeks out of the year, twice a year. I'm cultivating 3 acres at a time, so I'm out there at a minimal exposure. I'm usually working with employees when sometimes, and the cab was kind of in the way. As I get older, a cab tractor on my bigger tractor sounds like maybe that might be a good choice, but I would still probably keep my little tractor as an open station tractor. So presently, right now, I don't have a cab on any of my equipment. I could see where maybe that would be a plus for some jobs in the future, but the cab would still be in the way for the type of agriculture process that I'm doing. Florida sounds better in the wintertime as I get older.
Yeah, sounds pretty good to me, too. I did want to mention a couple things while we're asking for any final questions from the participants out there. If you do, please either raise your hand or write it in the chat window as we're starting to wrap up things. For those that may not be familiar with this resource that I have on our screen there, it was done several years ago here at National AgrAbility Project, and it deals with the issues of secondary injury. And it's basically a manual on recognizing potential hazards in assistive technology and finding ways to evaluate that risk. So I just want to run through a few quick things for you. Again, a secondary injury would be something that occurs after a primary disability, and it could be from a piece of technology, or it does not necessarily have to be. As Ed was mentioning, it could be from just a everyday living situation that causes another injury that leads to further problems. But some of the things that you might want to consider when you're thinking about secondary injury, we've talked about, burns if you're not able to feel heat, or fractures, as Ed was talking about, pressure sores we talked about. Amputation or loss of hearing could be other things that could be secondary injuries. I'll show you a few examples of technology that might be a little risky that could lead to problems of amputation. And one of the big issues that farmers deal with is that they're very creative and inventive, and many of them want to fabricate their own devices. So that's another issue for professionals to think about. The assessment tool, again, helps you evaluate and gives recommendations for how to assess potential for secondary injuries and how to prevent them. So if you have not checked that out, it's on our website under the resources and under the assistive technology section. Again, some other ideas that come from that publication. But here's, for an example, a homemade lift. And it's basically a beam that fits over the canopy there. That I'm not sure if that was completely fabricated or not, but lifts somebody up with a sling-type device. And the assessment tool gives you a variety of criteria for how to evaluate those. Are there specific issues? And I'll just touch on those quickly in a minute. Show you a few examples of homemade AT here. Here's quite an interesting one in terms of a utility vehicle. It's made out of a boom-type device. You can see some of these are obviously have concerns. This lift made out of looks like some wheel hubs and a winch lift. This is a particularly concerning one, kind of a homemade elevator to get somebody in the house. And then another fabricated lift. Added steps are fairly common, but obviously they can drag on the ground, get caught. Spring-loaded steps, another issue. Here's another lift that's made out of basically an I-beam protruding through the top of a cab. But the tool does list a variety of sections you can use, worksheets that are included. It gives suggestions for how to do an evaluation of assistive technology. And it gives you some examples. For example, it shows you different categories on how to evaluate the risk of a particular device. And this is an example of how this particular device was evaluated, and the numbers relate to the worksheets. Again, similar type of evaluation there. And that's the final one, I believe. So, Cliff, can you tell me if there are any other questions before I do our polls to end the session today?
The remaining questions were still related to the heat. Nick asked, do you wear heated gloves or socks? And I was wondering if you'd ever used hand warmers.
I have used hand warmers, and that's a plus. I don't use heated socks because I don't have sensation on my feet, and I would be more concerned of burning my skin or injuring there. Before I was injured, I did use heated socks, and I know that they can get hot, but I have not used any heated devices because of that. I even stay away from electric seat warmers and so on vehicles.
And that's all for the questions.
Okay, I want to just say thanks very much to Ed for that excellent and insightful presentation. Thank you very much, and I'm sure all of our participants really appreciated it. In fact, Ed was originally here not to do this webinar, but we have to do a lecture and a class in about half an hour, and we have to go across campus part way, so we're going to need to wrap things up quickly, but I wouldn't want to leave without doing our poll questions, because I think we'd like to get your feedback. So I'm going to do our quick poll questions, and the first one just asks about your affiliation. If you could tell us what type of program you're affiliated with. If you were affiliated with a program, you could pick the best choice there. And we ask that you remember not only to select the radio button, but also to hit the submit button that's down at the bottom of your screen.
I might add, Paul, if anybody would like to get in touch with me or have any other questions or anything, they're welcome to. My contact information's on my website. It's eatmorestrawberries.com, so they can get a hold of me there.
Okay, I'm going to close that poll in just a second. Open the next one. You could finish up real quick. Okay, you should be able to see the results there. Save those results real quick. And our next poll asks about the information that was shared today. Could you please tell us if it was valuable and if it met your expectations? Again, please remember to hit the submit button. Give you a couple more seconds on that one. Okay, and then you can see the results there. Our next question. asked about the technology. Was it usable, effective today for you? If you had any specific issues, if you could let us know in the chat window, that would be helpful. By the way, Cliff, also, could you make sure to try to save the chat text for us, please?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. A couple more seconds on that poll. Looks like people got along pretty well. I'll broadcast those results. And then our final question asks if you would attend another session in the series based on today's session. And I will open that one right here. Again, please remember to hit the submit button. Normally, we have a final poll that allows you to make comments, ask additional questions. But as I said, Ed and I are in demand today, so we have to head out the door pretty much right now, or 5 minutes ago. So if you have any other comments, I know some people have left those in the chat window, and appreciate that. And Cliff will be collecting those. If you have comments you want to make that way, you can do that. Otherwise, please email us at agrability@agrability.org. That's another way for you to let us know any comments or suggestions you have. Our final webinar of this 2015 Virtual National Training Workshop is this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, same URL, and that will be on carpal tunnel syndrome. So we hope that you will join us for that. Thank you for your input on that final question. Appreciate that. And with that, I will say thank you again to Ed, and thank you to those that participated today and asked some excellent questions. So as I save our final poll results, I will bid you a good afternoon and hope that many of you will be able to return this afternoon for our final webinar.